Picture this: November 18th, 1961. A young man clings to an overturned catamaran in the middle of the Arafura Sea, miles from shore. Drenched, exhausted, and stripped down to his underwear, he's crafted a makeshift flotation device from two plastic jerry cans. His companion urges him to stay put, to wait for rescue. But the young man looks to the horizon, then says 5 haunting words. "I think I can make it." Moments later, he slips into the water and disappears. Except, maybe he didn't. Welcome to Unsolved Cases, brought to you by Skoob. I'm your host, Larry Hunter, and today we're diving into one of the most enduring and disturbing mysteries of the 20th century: the disappearance of Michael Clark Rockefeller. Yes, that Rockefeller. The son, Nelson Rockefeller, a Harvard graduate, an heir to one of America's most powerful dynasties. And yet, he vanished in one of the most remote and culturally complex regions on Earth, the southwestern coast of Papua New Guinea. This isn't just the story of a man lost at sea. It's a tale of cultural collision, ancient traditions, sacred boundaries, and a mystery that refuses to stay buried. Because decades after Michael vanished, long-forgotten footage emerged. Footage that may have captured something unimaginable, something that could rewrite everything we thought we knew. Stay with us, because this is one case that still demands answers. Let me tell you about Michael Rockefeller, because he wasn't your typical heir to a fortune. Born into unimaginable wealth and privilege, Michael could have had anything: boardrooms, penthouses, political power. It was all there, waiting for him. But from an early age, something in him pulled toward the unknown. He wasn't interested in skyscrapers and society gatherings. He wanted discovery. He wanted to understand cultures and realms beyond his own gilded cage. Michael graduated from Harvard in 1960 with honors in history and economics. Economics didn't ignite his passion. People did. Culture did. Art and spiritual life did. So instead of stepping into his family's massive empire, he did something that probably baffled everyone around him. He joined an anthropological expedition as a sound technician, heading to Papua New Guinea, one of the world's least understood regions at the time. And this is where Michael's story really begins, because in New Guinea, he encountered the Asmat people. For several months, he navigated remote rivers, meticulously documenting tribal life, understanding customs, assisting in artifact collection. But this wasn't just an academic exercise for Michael. Something about the Asmat resonated with him on a profoundly personal level. Unlike most Westerners of his era, Michael didn't view indigenous peoples as exotic curiosities or savages. He saw them as artists, thinkers, individuals whose rich traditions merited preservation and respect. When he returned to the United States, he was restless. He couldn't shake what he'd experienced. So mere months later, he went back, this time independently, with clear intent. He wasn't going to merely collect museum artifacts. He was going to immerse himself fully in a civilization he profoundly admired. Michael lived among the Asmat for months, delving into their stories, observing their rituals, watching their artistic creations emerge from jungle wood through hand tools. His journals reveal a thoughtful, perceptive young man, deeply fascinated and committed to representing what he saw truthfully. His goal wasn't to modify Asmat culture, but to comprehend it. And that humility, that curiosity, that profound respect, it made him distinct. He was also remarkably courageous. The Asmat region was challenging, remote, unpredictable, and in certain areas, genuinely dangerous. Yet Michael thrived. He stayed longer and ventured further than any other Western collector before him. He served as a bridge between two worlds: the cosmopolitan elite of New York and the tribal traditions of the Asmat, and he bore this responsibility with elegance. By the time of his disappearance, Michael had amassed one of the most comprehensive collections of Asmat art ever assembled. His work shifted Western perceptions, redefining primitive art and celebrating its anthropological significance. Many of these pieces would later form the Michael C. Rockefeller Wing at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. But here's what matters most. Michael wasn't plundering. He was documenting, learning, conserving. At just 23 years old, this young man had already made a significant impact. The question is, what really happened to him? To understand Michael Rockefeller's story, you need to understand the Asmat people. Because this isn't just backdrop, this is everything. The Asmat tribe lived in the remote swamplands and dense jungles of southern New Guinea, shielded from the outside world for centuries. This region is characterized by expansive mangroves merging with the Arafura Sea, lengthy winding rivers cutting through forests so dense they obscure the sky. The land is harsh, inhabited by crocodiles, disease-bearing insects, treacherous terrain. But to the Asmat, it was both home and sacred land. The Asmat are known for their unparalleled creativity, but calling their work art in a Western sense completely misses the point. Every carving, every pattern, every wooden creation they produced was imbued with profound spiritual significance. Their most notable works are the biz poles, towering totems carved from single tree trunks. Outsiders might see captivating cultural relics. But for the Asmat, these poles were spiritual vessels. When a warrior was slain, Asmat beliefs held that his spirit became confined within a biz pole, waiting in unrest until vengeance was exacted. And that vengeance, it was real, historical, ritualistic headhunting, deeply tied to their beliefs in equilibrium and cosmic justice. To honor and liberate a slain warrior spirit, the Asmat would undertake to take another life. This wasn't random violence. It was ceremonial duty within a larger spiritual covenant, binding the tribe to unseen forces. Headhunting wasn't about revenge. It was about life, death, and the continuum of ancestry and order. It was communication with ancestors, a means of restoring balance between worlds through sacred acts. The Asmat functioned without written language, monetary systems, wheels, or metal. Yet their understanding of the natural and spiritual realms was sophisticated and intricately integrated into daily life. Their longhouses were tangible manifestations of ancestral lineage, filled with skulls, carvings, symbolic objects passed through generations. Every ritual was meticulously executed to preserve cosmic balance. Now, here's where it gets complicated. By the 1950s, Dutch colonial forces had encountered the Asmat. They tried to suppress headhunting and cannibalism through forceful measures. In 1957, just 4 years before Michael's disappearance, a lethal conflict involving Dutch patrols and Asmat villages claimed lives. It was a time of potent strife between colonial imposition and indigenous customs. The Asmat maintained their traditional practices well into the 20th century. To outsiders, they might seem intimidating or hostile, but they lived by a complex tapestry of meanings, binding them to their environment, their forebears, and one another. Visiting the Asmat was like stepping back in time, into a society governed not by modern constructs, but by mythology, ancestral memory, and the omnipresent spirits of the dead. This was the world Michael Rockefeller entered. And he didn't just visit. He dove in headfirst. November 1961. Michael Rockefeller was back in New Guinea, driven by a mission to collect significant Asmat art pieces for an exhibition and ultimately contribute to his father's Museum of Primitive Art in New York. To traverse the labyrinthine waterways, he used a self-fashioned catamaran, 2 dugout canoes joined by wooden planks, powered by a small outboard motor. With him were Dutch anthropologist René Wassing and 2 teenage Asmat guides. Over several weeks, the team journeyed from village to village. They traded items, tobacco, fishhooks, tools, for intricately carved poles, drums, masks. Each artifact was imbued with deep meaning, rooted in ancestral worship and community rituals. Despite grueling heat, Challenging terrains and linguistic obstacles, Michael's determination remained unwavering. His field notes, sketches, photographs, and narratives recorded from local elders reflected his commitment. He placed great importance on context, treating the Asmat not as research subjects, but as partners in safeguarding their cultural heritage. Michael meticulously recorded craftsmanship, the deeply embedded symbolism in carvings, the spiritual essence the Asmat infused into each piece. And then, on November 17th, everything went wrong. After passing through turbulent water, where a muddy river torrent met the vast blue of the Arafura Sea, the catamaran started taking on substantial water. Michael desperately pulled at the motor's starter cord, but the engine sputtered and died. The vessel, now powerless, was inexorably pulled farther into the open sea. The two local guides dove into the perilous water and paddled toward distant shore for help. Michael and Wassing made the decision to stay with the wrecked catamaran, clinging to hope of rescue. They waited through the night. No help came. By morning, November 18th, Michael had made his decision. He stripped down to his underwear and fashioned that makeshift flotation device by affixing 2 plastic jerry cans to his waist. The shore was estimated to be 10 to 12 miles away. Confident in his swimming ability, he turned to Wassing and said those final words, "I think I can make it." Then he slipped into the unforgiving water. Michael Rockefeller was never seen or heard from again. The aftermath was immediate and massive. Using helicopters, boats, and an army of searchers, American and Dutch officials scoured the coastline and dense jungle for weeks. The disappearance seized international attention because this was a Rockefeller. His father, Nelson Rockefeller, was governor of New York and would later serve as U.S. vice president. The world watched anxiously. Yet despite exhaustive efforts, nothing was found. No body, no clothing, no skeletal remains, not even a trace. The Dutch authorities ultimately determined his death as a probable drowning. The ocean's currents were robust, the distance intimidating, and the waters were home to sharks and saltwater crocodiles. The conclusion seemed logical, but whispers and rumors transcended official reports almost immediately. Many speculated that Michael had indeed reached shore, that he'd stumbled upon an Asmat village. Some speculations took a darker tone, suggesting he'd met an ominous fate. And these weren't baseless fables. Remember, the Asmat practiced headhunting and ritualistic cannibalism. Dutch colonial authorities had tried to suppress these practices, sometimes violently. That 1957 conflict, over 100 lives lost, fresh memories, fresh wounds. And in Asmat belief, such imbalances required remedy through retribution. In the decades following, sparse reports persisted. Missionary anecdotes, vague narratives from locals, illustrations hinting at a white man living among tribes. But none received confirmation. No concrete evidence ever surfaced. The questions persist. Did Michael perish in the sea? Or did he make it ashore, only to disappear under circumstances even more chilling? Here's where we need to talk about something uncomfortable: the possibility that Michael, with all his good intentions, crossed a line he didn't even know existed. Among the artifacts Michael zealously pursued was the bis pole. Remember, these towering, ornately carved structures weren't just art to the Asmat. They were sacred repositories for the souls of deceased warriors, embodying loss, vengeance, and ancestral remembrance. They were never meant to be commodified. In his attempt to acquire a bis pole, Michael may have inadvertently committed an unforgivable offense. During his visits to Asmat villages, he tried to barter for these poles, offering steel tools, fishing line, tobacco. From a Western perspective, this seemed fair and respectful. But to the Asmat, recovering from painful interactions with Dutch colonial forces, maintaining their own intricate system of reciprocity, this offer might have been perceived as demeaning, or worse, as theft. Removing a bis pole could have been interpreted as disturbing the spirits of the dead, or infringing upon a community's right to avenge their fallen warriors. In a society where equilibrium and retribution held sacred importance, this was no trivial matter. The historical context deepened existing tensions. Those 1957 Dutch raids, several Asmat men had been killed. Local communities harbored fresh memories. Certain spiritual beliefs necessitated that such imbalances be remedied through retribution. Revenge killings weren't random violence. They were essential steps to restore cosmic and communal balance. If Michael, fueled by Western ignorance and perceived privilege, inserted himself into this delicate cultural tapestry, particularly by handling sacred objects, it's conceivable he became a symbolic target. Not merely a man, but a symbol of the external force that had disrespected and disrupted their worldview. Reports and rumors suggest that Michael may have landed in a settlement, still grieving and poised for retribution. Whether he was perceived as a direct threat or a surrogate for a lost Asmat life remains uncertain. It's tempting to view Michael as a daring adventurer or tragic figure, but he might have been a naively optimistic outsider who made a significant misjudgment. He ventured into a realm with unwritten laws he couldn't comprehend, sought possessions that were never truly available, and may have inadvertently defiled sacred objects. Whether it was a failed exchange, a gesture misunderstood, or simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time, Michael's disappearance may have involved more than location. It was intertwined with cultural dynamics, belief systems, and unyielding boundaries, not to be crossed without severe repercussions. The official statement was simple: drowning, case closed. But that explanation left many unsatisfied. Over subsequent decades, Michael's disappearance grew into legendary enigma. Various theories emerged, ranging from plausible to fantastical. Theory 1. He survived the swim. Some believed Michael crossed those crocodile-infested waters and reached land barefoot and alone. Accounts suggest he was captured by an inland tribe, either held captive or, in more fantastical variations, revered as a foreign deity. Stories persisted for years about a white man living deep in the jungle, fluent in indigenous language, tattooed in tribal fashion, wearing nothing but a loincloth. Theory 2. He went native voluntarily. In this scenario, Michael, disillusioned with his previous life, chose to distance himself from wealth, societal expectations, and civilization's confines. He embraced freedom, aligning spiritually and physically with the Asmat, rather than remaining in East Coast affluence. From this perspective, he wasn't lost. He'd consciously chosen a different existence, deeply entwined with the primal and spiritual. Theory 3. And perhaps the most chilling, Michael reached shore only to be killed and consumed by the very people whose art he sought to collect. This theory isn't tabloid fodder. The Asmat practiced ritual headhunting and cannibalism, traditions holding cultural and spiritual significance related to vengeance, ancestral appeasement, and cosmic balance. Just 4 years before Michael's disappearance, that violent encounter with Dutch colonial police resulted in several tribal fatalities. To the Asmat, Michael, a solitary foreign white man, might have been perceived as a fitting sacrifice to rectify the scales of justice. This theory haunted Dutch officials. In Otjanep, an area on Michael's itinerary, rumors surfaced about a white outsider being captured and killed soon after he disappeared. Over subsequent years, missionaries, colonial authorities, and anthropologists shared secondhand stories about villagers quietly confessing to Michael's grim fate, sometimes pointing to bones or artifacts allegedly his. One missionary reportedly encountered a startling confession. A white individual had been killed and consumed in tribal ritual, his skull preserved, his bones divided among warriors. For those disinclined to believe in cannibalism or voluntary assimilation, nature offered a more straightforward explanation. The Arafura Sea is notorious for formidable currents and teams with saltwater crocodiles and tiger sharks. If Michael succumbed to the sea, his body could have quickly been carried off or consumed, leaving no sign. Even those jerry cans might have offered scant protection in such treacherous waters. The Rockefeller family, despite thorough investigations and endless resources, never uncovered evidence sufficient to dismiss the drowning explanation. Yet they too seem to grapple with uncertainty. How could someone as robust, well-educated, and determined as Michael vanish so utterly without trace? The mystery persists, retold through books, documentaries, productions, and whispered accounts. Each repetition layers new theories, yet never concludes decisively. And now, we come to the most extraordinary part of this story. In 1969, a decade after Michael vanished, adventure journalist Milt Macklin embarked on a daring journey. Working with a film crew for an adventure magazine, Macklin ventured into New Guinea's secluded jungles with one objective: unravel the truth behind Michael Rockefeller's disappearance. He was determined to capture everything on film, hoping to transform any discovery into a pioneering documentary. They spent weeks exploring distant Asmat villages, interviewing locals, filming cultural rituals, remote rivers, uncharted paths. But their exhaustive efforts yielded no answers. No conclusive evidence. No revelation worthy of cinematic acclaim. Disappointed, Macklin returned to the United States and packed away the 16mm film canisters, consigning them to a dusty storage unit. For 40 years, those reels languished untouched, remnants of an adventure that failed to deliver. Then, over 4 decades later, a new team of documentarians began working on a film about Michael Rockefeller's disappearance. Equipped with contemporary information and resources, they scoured archives. In the process, they stumbled upon a reference to Macklin's 1969 expedition. Driven by curiosity, they traced the old film canisters. As they reviewed the footage, initial scenes appeared as anticipated: lush jungles, winding rivers, daily tribal customs. But then, hidden within the layers of film, something emerged that altered everything. A fleeting, haunting glimpse. A pale-skinned figure, scantily clad, momentarily visible in a distant village scene. The figure was neither part of Macklin's crew, nor part of the local population. The camera had unknowingly captured someone for a split second, the image partly concealed, yet sufficiently vivid to provoke serious inquiry. Could this be Michael Rockefeller? Could he have survived, integrated deep within the jungle, remaining hidden from a world that had long assumed him dead? The revelation sent tremors through the production team. The idea that Macklin had unwittingly captured footage of such significance, only to never inspect it, added mysterious layers to an already peculiar tale. Experts converged to scrutinize the footage. Anthropologists, facial recognition analysts, historians specializing in the Asmat region examined the clip meticulously. Some aligned the figure's likeness with Michael's known descriptions. Others refrained from conclusions. Adding intrigue, villagers interviewed in subsequent decades spoke enigmatically of a ghost man, an outsider who ventured into their community and mysteriously never departed. The conundrum of what Macklin's camera glimpsed remains unresolved. But the rediscovery of that overlooked footage reignited discussions about one of the 20th century's most chilling disappearances. A case deemed long closed was, in an instant, anything but resolved. So what really happened to Michael Rockefeller? Did he drown in the Arafura Sea, his body consumed by currents and predators, lost forever to the vast Pacific? Did he reach shore and fall victim to a culture still reeling from colonial violence, becoming an unintended sacrifice in an ancient cycle of retribution? Did he somehow survive and choose to remain, living out his days as the ghost man whispered about in village stories? Or is the truth something we haven't even considered? Something that remains shrouded in the dense, secretive jungles of Papua, hidden in the silence between worlds? Michael Clark Rockefeller was born into privilege, but drawn to the margins. A man of influence who chose to listen. A history student dedicated to living in the present. At just 23, his life wielded significant impact. And even now, more than 6 decades after his disappearance, his legacy continues to resonate. Because ultimately, Michael's story isn't just about what happened to one young man. It's about the collision between cultures, about sacred boundaries and the consequences of crossing them, about the mysteries that persist when worlds that were never meant to meet suddenly intersect. In the end, whether Michael Rockefeller drowned, was killed, or somehow survived, the truth remains where it has always been, in the dense jungle, in the memories of a people whose stories were never meant for outsiders, in the grainy footage of a decades-old film reel that captured something impossible. And perhaps that's exactly where the truth was always meant to stay. The official story may be settled, but the truth, that remains elusive. If you want to explore what really happened, the evidence, the theories, the whispers from deep within the jungle, make sure to download the Skoob app on the App Store or Play Store. Until next time, I'm Larry Hunter, and this has been Unsolved Cases, where the truth is never where you left it.